Tony Cornell is a dedicated and committed psychic investigator, a ghost hunter. He is one of several hundred such people in this country who spend a great deal of their time researching into the details of psychic events. They come from all walks of life and many of the professions. There are historians and doctors, scientists and lawyers. They are searching, in a sense, for the Holy Grail, the paranormal event that will prove beyond doubt the reality of another existence. On the way, they investigate all kinds of events in all kinds of situations to lift the veil, however briefly, on that other world. For Tony Cornell, one of his most fascinating stories is the ghost at the Bell Inn. It involves Colin and his wife on their honeymoon.
I never did believe in ghosts whatsoever. I had no interest, no thought about them whatsoever. But I definitely do now. There's no two ways in my mind.
It seemed to start with that he'd got just about everything that you'd have in a case, and that seemed, in a way, exceptional. And the case is fascinating from the point of view that there's 37 different events occurring over those 3 days they were there, to two people who didn't believe in ghosts, who'd never had any experience like this before. But the more I looked at it, the more I heard his account, there's no doubt whatever that he had had a very genuine experience.
This is the actual room in the Bell Hotel at Thetford, where myself and my previous wife spent our honeymoon. The bed in the corner is the actual bed that I slept in when most of the occurrences took place over the 3 days that we were here. We arrived on the Friday evening, came up to the room, and there was a cold spot outside the door. As I unlocked the door and went to open it, I felt as if something pushed against the door from the other side. Didn't really take much notice of it, just thought perhaps, oh, it's an old door, what have you. Came into the room, got changed, went down for dinner, came back up, same thing again. Cold spot outside the door, door hard to open, came in, went to bed. We both heard footsteps outside the door, in the corridor, going up and down, up and down. Then they were inside the room, as if somebody was sort of pacing across the floor. There was a glow appeared in the corner of the mural, which we both saw. And I sort of just dropped off to sleep. I even thought perhaps it was a reflection from something. Around about 3 to 4 in the morning, I woke up and a young girl stood in the middle of the room. For a start, I thought it was somebody who shouldn't have been in the room, or a maid or whatever. She walked across the room and vanished near the window. She was not transparent, as if the ghost in a storybook where they come in and you can see the fireplace behind them. She was solid, so real and so lifelike that you actually mistook her for a real person.
The Bell Inn goes back a long way, around 300 years, and it's linked with all kinds of stories. Both guests and staff have had many unexplained experiences here. But undoubtedly, one of the most persistent stories concerns the ghostly woman in room number 10. In fact, she's known to the staff as Betty.
I've seen something in both rooms 8 and room 6, and both times the experiences were very similar. I'd be in there making the bed, and I'd suddenly have this weird feeling that somebody was watching me, and I would turn round and there would be nobody there, but there was this, it was like a white haze. It wasn't menacing or frightening or anything, it was just there, and it just sort of floated past me and went through the wall. And that happened in both those rooms. My first experience of seeing the ghost in room 10 was when I was in there making the bed with one of the other girls, and we were having a bit of a laugh and joke, and we asked Betty if she'd been a good girl and whether she'd let our guests get a good night's sleep. And with that, we had this, the room went terribly cold, and we had this this funny sensation of getting goosebumps all over. It was just like every hair on our body stood on end. We sort of both looked at each other and both ran out of the room.
On the second night of the honeymoon, the ghost of the young girl came again.
The apparition actually appeared in front of the settee. She walked from there across a straight path and disappeared just before she reached the small chest of drawers that is in front of the window, which overlooks the churchyard. It was as if she was looking out of the window towards, in that direction. She was 12 to 13 years of age, fair hair, long white gown, garland around her head, puffed out sleeves. She was almost self-illuminating. Even though it was dark in the room, you could see her clearly. That morning I was taken downstairs by the manager. I think it was the assistant manager. And he showed me a portrait which hangs downstairs. And I was slightly taken aback. The actual portrait from the nose upwards was an older version of the girl's face who was actually in the room the previous night.
Betty is Betty Radcliffe. She was the wife of an owner of the Bell Inn and eventually inherited the inn herself. She died in 1829. There is a legend of a tragic affair with one of the servants of the inn that led to her death. But Tony Cornell is loath to accept a story for which he can find no historical verification.
Many of the stories that we do investigate have suffered from embellishment and adding and whatnot. It seems in some ways, I think, that we humans like a mystery. And having found a good mystery, we can't leave it alone, we add to it. But I don't think that applies in the case that we're dealing with at the moment.
On the third night, Colin did his best to keep awake. He wasn't frightened, but he was deeply intrigued by what was going on.
I lay on the bed the other way around to how you normally would. I'd got my head on my hands watching the television, and I heard a tapping noise. It was as if the noise that a radiator makes when it's got an airlock, like a constant tap. I looked across to the wardrobe, and the actual handle was moving up and down on its own. It was actually tapping against the wardrobe. I then looked back to the television, and the television picture was flickering. I thought for a minute perhaps it was just interference, something like that, and then I looked down behind at an angle, and you could actually see the wire, the actual aerial lead, being moved in a whipping fashion, as if somebody got hold of the end and whipped. My ex-wife was not too happy at this point. She was getting rather worried about the whole thing. On previous nights, I'd slept on the right-hand side of the bed, nearest the wall. This last night, I slept on the left-hand side of the bed, and the lamp was left on. Again, during the night, there was the running up and down the hall. There was the footsteps inside the room, and the glowing light seemed this time to appear on the other side of the mural. During the night, the footsteps again in the room, and it was just about daylight. It was getting daylight, and I was laying asleep in bed. I woke up, and the girl was sitting on the edge of the bed, literally at my feet. But she wasn't looking away, she was actually looking at me. She slowly got up, and all the time she was looking at me as she went around the bed. So she kept her focus on me as she got up, went round the bed, and she walked slowly towards the window. And it was actually a physical feeling, because the bed lifted. As she got off the bed, you could feel the mattress rise. She actually turned, walked towards the window, and disappeared again.
The professional ghost hunters see their main role as being to dig out the truth about a story, to separate fact from imagination, legend from historical accuracy. What, for example, is there in the historical record to establish some kind of verification? How reliable are the witnesses?
My view and my attitude is that I think it's one of the most important cases that we've had from the point of view of truth and actual phenomena for quite a number of years. Because the fact that we got into the investigation so early, the questions I put to Colin, they all tie up, it all comes up as truth. He doesn't slip anywhere. And particularly as he's a man who knew nothing about it, neither did his wife, weren't interested in the subject, thought it was all junk. What they come out with are the genuine facts that you find in a real, live, dead, if you like, ghost story.
What do you do if you have a ghostly experience? It's not an easy question to answer. You may believe it will never confront you. But from our researches up and down the country, it's a question that many more people than you would expect are faced with. And people react in very different ways. Some, for example, just refuse to talk about it. Some turn to their doctor, others to a priest. But eventually, many of them end up talking to a professional ghost hunter. That was the case with our second story, which comes from Paisley in Scotland. A series of unexplained events in, of all places, the art department of the local college.
It was in early February, in afternoon, somewhere between 4 and 5 in the afternoon, when I had been working down here in the pottery. I'd been throwing and dressing a big pot on the wheel, and my workshop steward, Peter, was with me. Now, to enable us to have peace to work on this, because it was quite a delicate job, and being a quiet afternoon, we locked the outer doors, and the classroom door in the glazing room was also locked, so that everything was absolutely locked fast. I had just finished a particularly delicate section of the pot when, much to our surprise, we heard the door open. First we heard the key turn in the lock, and then the door opened and shut. And then the sound of a heavy foot on the stone step. This then changed onto the sound of the heavy feet walking on the wooden floor. Heavy treads, somewhere about 10 in all. Not forgetting, actually, that the room had been locked, I said to Peter, check, see what that is. And he looked, and as soon as he looked, the footsteps stopped. We looked at each other, we were quite surprised at this. Checked, the door was locked. Everything was as it was, no one in the building at all. So back to the pot and continued working on it. And within less than half an hour, this happened another twice. Exactly the same thing. Door opening, shutting. Heavy feet on the stone step, changing to the muffled echo of the feet on the wooden planks, and stopped again just instantly when we looked round the door to see what was what. No one was there, doors were all locked, no one in the building at all.
About 6:15, we were going to have a cup of tea. The doors were all locked. We had done our work. There was nobody in the building, and we locked the doors because we were isolated here. So went into the staff room, which is here. I was sitting facing the door, Betty was to the side. And we heard this door opening from down the bottom end, the footsteps coming up and coming up. And as they got up to the door, I just let out a scream, jumped in Betty's lap.
So I went to the door and opened it, the staff room door. No, come out and I shouted, "Empty there." There were no answer, so I looked in that room next, and then the other room. I just come back up. I said to Phyllis, there's nobody there. She goes, what was it then? Who was it? I said, I don't know. She went, come on.
We never heard any footsteps going away. You know, they just stopped at the door
I said,
and that was it.
There's nobody there, so we just went away, got our coats and ran out.
Footsteps, voices, whisperings behind the door. The unexplained events became more numerous. But on one notable occasion, there was a clear demonstration of immense strength. Alan came into his studio to find not only that it had been completely rearranged, but that 3 heavy pots, each weighing 200 or 300 weight, had been lifted up onto the bench. An extreme example of what ghost hunters call an apport.
One of the strangest incidents was concerned with the moving of glazed bins. Now, these bins are full of actual glaze, which is to be put onto actual bisque fire pots. Now, one would normally lay all the pots out ready for firing prior to glaze. And this particular morning, all the pots had been moved. They'd been moved from their normal storage areas, which were in some cases locked in cupboards elsewhere in the building, and had been systematically laid out on the tables using the same procedure as I would normally have used prior to glazing. The only difference was that these big glaze bins were up on the actual tables. Now, it took 3 of us to lift these back down again, such as the weight. Now, not a drop of glaze had been spilt. No pots had been glazed, but the whole place was laid out just ready for glazing to begin. Now, I couldn't explain this.
Most of the happenings in the studio were known to only 1 or 2 people. But late one evening, there was an event that involved a whole class of students.
We had 14, 15 people in the pottery working all evening, and the temperature was very high, somewhere in the 70s or 80s. On finishing, we locked the door and I went for my jacket. One of the students ran down the corridor and said, "You've locked someone in." I said, "It can't be. It's a Yale lock. People don't, you can open it from the inside." And the door was vibrating violently. Again and again and again. I took the key and opened the door, somewhat with trepidation, shall we say. And I was met by a rush of icy, cold air. The temperature in the actual room, in the pottery, was freezing. It was like walking into a winter's night. Now, this had all happened within 5 minutes, 10 minutes. All the doors were shut and the place was all securely locked.
Eventually, the story reached the ears of a local paranormal investigator, Trish Robertson.
It's undoubtable that in this particular college, the sound phenomena is absolutely amazing. I mean, many witnesses have witnessed the footsteps coming along stone stairs, going onto wooden floors, onto stone stairs again, and just nobody there. Absolutely amazing, and it's been witnessed by so many people that it's undoubtedly happened. The feeling of people being behind people, someone behind you, look behind you all the time, is always there with a lot of people. They cannot put their finger on that. One of the cleaners had whispering in a supposedly locked room to discover no one there again. That these things, once again, are not uncommon. Now, in this particular college, we cannot get to the bottom of why this should be so. We don't have enough history of the place at the moment to find out just what's going on.
Professional paranormal investigators, notably the Society for Psychical Research, have been around for well over 100 years. They have amassed a quite remarkable archive. It includes every conceivable kind of paranormal and psychic event, eyewitness accounts, historical researches and so on. It is a quite extraordinary record. When they're called into a case, they can rarely, if ever, offer an explanation. What they can do is offer some kind of reassurance by putting the events in their context, placing them in the paranormal world. But they have not achieved that for which they were established in the first place, namely scientific proof of the paranormal. Is it likely that it will ever be achieved?
I'm inclined to think that over the years it's become a too difficult subject to explain for science. But I'm also inclined to think that perhaps a scientist might produce in time a little bit of the jigsaw puzzle that we're trying to fit together, and that'll help us answer all the many questions that we still have. We don't know really what we're dealing with. We know that these things happen. There's no doubt whatever that there are such things as poltergeists, there are such things as ghosts. Too many sane and sensible people I've met, at any rate, have seen these things and experienced things. And I myself, I hope I've got my feet on the ground. I've seen 7 very violent poltergeist cases. Now, if these things are happening, science has got to come up with an answer.
I think personally that there's great danger in imagining that we're always progressing. Sometimes we can learn more if we look back across the centuries and find what people were saying or doing then than looking forward into the future. And also by looking at other cultures and seeing how they react, we can learn more than by looking at our own culture. My own hope would be that science would be able to understand this, and my own prediction would be that in fact we would see that mind and brain are not the same, and that the non-locality theory, which is now achieving quite a lot of attention among scientists, and that is that the mind is separate from brain but is normally operating through it, that this would perhaps be established within science, and that we would find that it is indeed direct contact between mind and mind that allows for these phenomena like telepathy to actually happen.
The whole body of the psychic phenomenon is an indication that there are, to quote one of the communicators, there are seas to be explored, and we've only been on the shore of that ocean, and the whole sea of truth is before us, and we deny it, we ignore it at our peril, because, quite frankly, unless we understand human personality and what it is all about, we're going to go into the 21st century, and this human situation is going to be immeasurably worse than it is today. But if we can understand human personality and the drives that come to it and what makes it tick, then hopefully the 21st century will be immeasurably better.